Coming at ya from Bellingham, Washington. This is Two Nuts in the Sack. I'm Julie,
I'm Gavin.
and today we're going to continue on with Star Trek. Except we're going to talk about the movies.
First
Okay,
off, we'll start with the original cast movies.
Star Trek, the motion picture. 1979.
This movie came out before both of us were born, but I'm sure we've both seen it probably a dozen times between us.
Yes.
Was let's just do a quick synopsis rundown. What do you got?
It's kind of a there's kind of a floating cloud. Uh it has an artificial intelligence. It's rather an alien. It
Right,
attacks the whole crew.
right, and it's like in danger of destroying the entire planet,
Yes.
and they have to figure out what was wrong with it. And that thing, I think it had something to do with Voyager. I remember, like, somehow, like, Voyager was assimilated into this cloud.
Voyager became a new species.
Aha. And yeah, I remember there was a bald chick in it.
Yeah, it's like the alien merged and then Voyager became a new species.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so then they just, like, it was basically like Voyager completed its mission. Although they're in the 23rd century, so that'd have been like almost 300 years that Voyager was traveling through space before it encountered this thing. And we kind of got what we asked for when we sent Voyager out there. Because did you know a little bit about Voyager?
I know a little bit, but go
Yeah.
ahead and keep
Well, yeah.
talking.
Well, Voyager was basically, it had basically basic hieroglyphics that cataloged our math skills and our basic genealogy and human, or the makeup of the human body. And it had sounds of the planet. There was a golden record that was placed into Voyager when it was sent out, hoping that any alien beings that encountered Voyager would have a record player so that they could hear the sounds of the Earth. So again, it's far reaching, but not outside canon for Star Trek.
This is true.
But ultimately, Captain Kirk and his crew save the day, and the world is safe.
Right?
And this leads us into
The Wrath of Khan, 1982. If you remember correctly, Khan is after the Genesis device, and Captain Kirk is like, "Oh my God, how is Khan a thing again?"
yeah, because he thought that he had thwarted him in the series, but Khan was after the Genesis device because he wanted to bring back to life his this planet that was dead, and that's exactly what the Genesis device did.
Right.
Consequently, the Genesis device was created by Kirk's ex-wife, and one of the project's leading engineers was Kirk's son.
And Khan ends up kidnapping a couple of the crew members, Chekhov and Captain Terrell. And if you remember, he takes those slug like, disgusting creatures, puts them in the helmets, puts them on their heads, and they crawl up into their ears. And you see even like a little bit of blood come out.
Well, I mean, if something's going in, something's got to come out.
And so they end up controlling their
Right.
brains.
It was a mind control worm, which the name eludes me right now, but
I don't remember what they're called either.
so anyhow, so he's able to do this, and he gets control, gets the Enterprise to sort of bow to his demands, and they end up saving Chekhov and Captain Tyrell, which was a beautiful performance from Carl Weathers,
Yes, indeed.
whom most of us remember from Predator,
Right.
because he was the black guy who was Dutch's best friend, and they did the manly hand clench handshake. But that's neither here nor there, nor related to Star Trek. So let's move on.
We move
So
forward, and Captain Kirk's son actually ends up dying.
that's right, because Khan decides that if he can't have the device, no one will, and so he attacks the Genesis planet, which spurs an explosion, which leads to the Genesis device, all of its power being evacuated onto this one planet that they had worked in. I remember like when they first showed it, and then Kirk's wife was like, "Can I cook or can I cook?" Which, as a chef, that line really struck deep into me. But then, after the destruction of the Genesis device, Khan sabotages the Enterprise, and it's left to Spock to save everybody.
Yes, and so he begins dying in the end, and he says the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few.
Right, he
So
sacrificed himself.
so noble.
Yeah, and he turns to Kirk, and he says, "You are now and shall forever be my greatest friend."
Don't
Which was
forget
just fucking beautiful.
before he does that, he puts his
His Katra.
Katra into Bones.
Yeah, he in the process of him dying, and literally like his face and body are melting away. He has time to look at at the doctor and perform some sort of mind meld, mind transference, where he basically puts his whole spirit, the Katra of the Vulcan, into McCoy.
Right.
And then he says this stuff with Kirk, and it's very heartwarming, but also just heartbreaking, because now Spock is dead. Leonard Nimoy no more. He melted, pile of goo. And they scooped up that pile of goo, and they put him into a coffin, and they shot him off into space.
Correct.
Which
and
is
then
a nice segue.
He lands into the Genesis planet.
Right, and that's so therein lies the next segue, because they didn't know where Spock's body was going. They just sort of shot it off willy-nilly. They weren't like, "Oh, there's the Genesis planet. Blah, Spock." No. They shot it off into the universe, and then it made a great segue into the next movie,
which is The Search for Spock from 1984. This basically, a little recap is, okay, so Spock's dead, and Kirk goes and revisits the Genesis planet, and then Saavik finds Spock as a teenager.
Right, and Saavik was Spock's replacement, played by Kirstie Alley.
Correct.
But so she finds, I thought she found Spock as a child, and then she
maybe
took him back
he is a child.
Yeah.
I thought he was a teenager, but maybe he's a child.
No, he was a child, and then she took Spock back to the Enterprise, and by the time she got back to the Enterprise, then he was a teenager, and then he was like Spock again.
Right, correct. So, meanwhile, they find Spock, and there's like all these deadly Klingons looking for them.
Because it was basically proof that the Genesis Genesis device worked, and so now the Klingons want it because it could be used for good or bad.
Right, correct. Then, meanwhile, McCoy is dealing with Spock's Katra. Is that correct?
Yeah, because
Katra.
he's still got Spock's
So-
soul bouncing around
So
in his noggin.
he's going a little crazy, a little bonkers with dealing with having this inside him. It's like, yeah, his spirit is in him.
So the crew heads to Vulcan, and they use Spock's dad to get Spock's soul out of McCoy's body into Spock's body, so that Spock can continue being Spock, although he's just a little different, which McCoy touches on later in a couple of movies later.
His personality is lacking.
Yeah. And so that was basically like what I got from Search of Spock, or what I can honestly, that's what I can remember from the Search for Spock.
Pretty much.
Which brings us to both of our favorites from these original movie series.
The Voyage Home from 1986, where there's a probe, and they figure out that this probe that wants to destroy the Earth wants humpback whales.
Yeah, because when this probe approached Earth, it was looking for the whales, sending these signals down, but these signals were disrupting weather patterns and the oceans and just causing havoc all over the world.
This takes the Enterprise, or not the Enterprise. They get a Klingon ship.
Yeah, they hop into a Klingon
ship, and they go back in time
by slingshotting around the sun. I'm pretty sure they went counterclockwise, because that's the only wise that makes sense.
It's so they end up in San Francisco
in the 80s.
Yes. Which is really hilarious. And it's really funny because Kirk is walking with Bones and Spock, and this guy is like, "Look out, dumbass," and he's like, "Well, double dumbass on you."
Because at that point they're still wearing their Starfleet uniforms, and they're walking around at the time modern San Francisco. And so they just look out of place, so that's why the guy calls him a dumbass.
But I think he ran into him.
Yeah, well, he bumps shoulders with him, but then he looks at him and he's just like, dumbass. But this movie was there was a lot of honestly, this movie had that formula that we talked about back in the DC, when we talked about heart, humor, and heroism. This movie had that perfect balance, because there was the time when Scotty goes to the manufacturer of transparent aluminum, but the manufacturer of transparent aluminum from the future, and he tries to talk to the computer, and then the guy hands him a mouse, and he uses it as if it were like a microphone. He's like, "Hello, computer," and the guy goes, "No, that's not how that works." And he's like, "Oh, archaic society." He has to type in the equation to make transparent aluminum.
Well, do you remember the part when they're on the bus and there's that punk rock guy, and he's just blaring music on his radio and being really obnoxiously loud, and Spock totally does the Vulcan mind meld on him and knocks him the fuck out?
Did just a Vulcan neck pinch.
Neck pinch! That's that one. Yeah. I got it wrong. Okay. Thank you, Gavin, for correcting me.
He's just like, I'm tired of you. How often have you wanted to do that in your whole life? Just be able to just right on somebody's shoulder, and they just
you're done.
Pile of bricks on the floor. But yeah, and then there was and then this is where the nuclear vessels comes from, when Chekhov is asking to find a nuclear core that they can use to reinvigorate the warp core of the Klingon vessel so that they can actually gain enough power to get home, because they split off into teams to like figure all that stuff out.
Don't you love when it says, they be whales here?
Yeah, exactly. Captain, there'd be whales. Like Montgomery Scott, good God, such an underrated character, but he was like honestly one of my favorites. Like of the original cast, he was my favorite. I mean, Data, TNG, Data, the original series, Scotty, for sure. So where do they go? So they again save the world, bring whales back, transport them into the ocean. Whales just
Well, don't forget, you
okay.
said they go back to the future first.
Well, yeah,
That's what you said.
Because yeah, I mean, like, where else do you go? I mean, if you're from the future and you go back to the past, you can't be like, we're going back to the present. That would have made a lame Marty McFly movie title. They're going back to the future.
Well, right.
So, anyhow, they save the world. Yay, Enterprise crew. And they eventually cleared their names again, and they were able to reacquire the Enterprise so that they could go on their next mission, which was
The Final Frontier, 1989, where Spock, Kirk, and Bones go to the planet at the center of the galaxy, confront the renegade Vulcan, Cybok, and quest for God.
right. Well, that was Cybok's quest. He was the one.
Well, he brought them along, though. They were all in on it, so.
Yeah, because he got some like message from God, quote unquote, that he needed to commandeer a starship and go to the center of the galaxy, break through the frontier, which was this big cloud surrounding the center of the galaxy, where every time they sent a probe or tried to fly a ship in there, nobody ever returned from. But Cybok, who happened to be Spock's half brother, dun dun dun, because nobody knew that Spock had a half brother. It's never been like mentioned before this.
Not to mention
Like,
they look nothing alike.
Honestly, they got the eyebrows. That's where their it begins and ends with their eyebrows.
And they're nothing alike.
Yeah. But well, that's because Cybok gave in to the Vulcan animal instincts and defied logic by truly embracing all of his emotions. There's that, oh, what is it called? I don't remember. But
Cybok is such a creeper, though. He's all like getting in everybody's head to be like, I'm gonna make you feel this, baby.
Well, that was part of like his like Vulcan power, was he was able to like tap into a person's emotions and then align that person's emotions with his goal, which was to find ultimate peace, aka find God. But so he was just able to like touch them and whisper into their ear, and they were like, yeah, that guy's got a point. And he took Uhura under his spell, he took Chekhov under his spell, he took Sulu under his spell, and that was like the people that he needed.
Bones did not like that.
No, because when he went to Bones, what he made Bones see was his dying dad, and he was just like, man, it's like, I get what you're saying, but this is wrong. I don't want to do this. Don't make me do this. And he's like, no, if you encounter your greatest fear or your greatest regret, then you can overcome that emotion. And so, but that just made them click over, and they were like, okay, sure, let's go along. This guy, he's got the right idea. And so he's able to take over the entire Enterprise, and you have Kirk, Spock, and McCoy in prison on the ship, but thank goodness for Montgomery Scott, because he's the one that's able to break them out of prison. And it really turned out to be to no avail, because they still all go with Savic's plan. And they end up going through the final frontier. They meet this god character who's like, bring me to your ship. And Kirk asks the most logical question.
What does God need with a ship? And then he's like, pew, 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 and zaps him down.
He zaps him with his laser eyes.
And then Spock comes back and he's like, yeah, what does God need with a ship? And then he goes,
just,
pew, pew, pew again.
Yeah. And he gets zapped. And then even Spock's brother is like,
why are you hurting my friends?
Yeah, he's like, you're supposed to be God. Like, I came to find you. You sent me on this quest. I've been able to do shit and make people do all the things that I want to do. But why? And so he starts a little tussle with this God character who we never really like find out much about what it is. Like, is it like an Olympic Titan? Like, is it some sort of like crazy like demigod that got sentenced to? There was just so many like unanswered questions.
Well, he definitely wasn't God.
Well, of course, because the Klingons were able to take him out with fucking photon torpedo. Because all the while the Klingons are just trying to kill Kirk, because if the leader of that Klingon warbird kills Kirk, then he becomes the greatest warrior in the galaxy. But he doesn't do that. He ends up helping Kirk, and God character dies. They all get the F out of the final frontier, go back through, and you don't ever see the God character again because they blew him up. But Sybok, gone too, makes Spock a little sad, but he's a Vulcan, so he gets over it. And once again, the galaxy is saved, which brings us to
The Undiscovered Country in 1991, where Klingon Chancellor Garkon goes to Earth to negotiate a peace treaty with the United Federation of Planets.
Right. So the Klingons' home planet, which was called, it has a really hard to pronounce name. I have to look at this just for a second. Just give me 1 second, because it's a convoluted name. It's Kronos.
Kronos?
No, Kronos.
Kronos.
Yeah, QO'Nos.
Okay, Kronos.
So the moon of Kronos is called Praxis, and they get their primary energy source from Praxis. So they're mining the shit out of this moon, and they mine it to the point of devastation, and it collapses. And so but because of the collapse, it's actually leaking like radiation onto Kronos. And so the Klingon Empire has to reach out to the Federation. And so they reach out to the Federation, which doesn't really sit well with the rest of the Klingon Empire, because basically they're asking their greatest enemies to help them out. And so this causes a rift. But it doesn't matter, because Kronos, the Klingon Empire, like their home, is in danger. And so they need help. And so the Klingon ambassador goes to the Federation for help. But there are factions on both sides that don't want this to happen. And so they assassinate the Klingon ambassador who wants to get peace. Again, convoluted. Gotta love it. Star Trek.
I just remember the purple blood bubbles all over the place.
Right. Because they like turn off the artificial gravity and
all the Klingons are like dead,
like floating around, and then they get shot to shit, and there's like blood bubbles like floating around. But all that happened on the Enterprise.
Correct.
So Kirk and McCoy get held responsible for this, and so they're sent to a prison colony, and Spock has to sort of defend them whilst the rest of the crew of the Enterprise go and try and figure out a way to free Kirk and McCoy. And through a very like Great Escape type escape, they break out of this alien prison and they go back to Earth, because the plot thickens as the guard of the ambassador was actually the one who ordered the hit on the ambassador. And so when another ambassador, or maybe the same ambassador, I can't really remember, but when that other ambassador is about to speak to Starfleet, there's another plot against his life, and Kirk and McCoy are rescued by the Enterprise, and they come back to save the day just in time. And they end up killing the would-be assassin, and they do end up brokering a peace treaty, and they blow up the fucking guard of the original ambassador, who was played by what's his name? Saruman. Who? Come on, give me a hand here. Who played that, like the Klingon? He was the same guy who played Saruman. It was Christopher
Lloyd?
No, that's Back to the Future.
Right. Oh my gosh.
Christopher Plummer.
Right.
Plummer. And for some reason, he was a big fan of Shakespeare, even though he hates the human race. He still enjoys some of the human culture. And so he said famously, Tachmach, Tachbech, which is the only bit of Klingon I know, and I'm kind of proud of that. But it means to be or not to be. And that was like his whole like premise, is he's like, I'm a Klingon. We're at war. We're a warring society. That's what we do. We don't make peace treaties. We just fucking blow you up. And so that was why he didn't want this peace treaty, even if it meant saving the Klingon homeworld. So Spock, in his infinite ingenuity, because they still can't figure out what happens with like cloaking technology, because it wipes them from their sensors, sends the like spiraling torpedo. You know which one I'm talking about? It like weans back and forth, and then it blows up the Klingon warbird while it's in cloak, because while it's in cloak it can't have any shields up.
Correct.
And that was the end of that movie, which also is the end of the original series cast in movies, except for the ones that we're going to talk about next. So I need a break. You need a break. To be continued.
and we'll go over the Next Generation movies.